I, along with several other members of the club, um, went to the Galapagos in 2019, and this was arranged by Melissa and Dennis, and his family was along, and Diane Bilderbecks was along, and a couple others. So we did a tour of the Galapagos in 2019, and this was in March. And we did a 7-island tour, which they call the Southern Route. And essentially, for now when you go to the Galapagos, you essentially stay on boats which visit other islands and or various islands, and then every day you'd do various excursions, and most of the time it was going to a different island as we traveled around, and other times people went snorkeling and things like that. So it's a good way of seeing lots of the islands and having excellent accommodations and just a good time. So one of the reasons for going to the Galapagos is seeing all the wonderful wildlife, and so we saw a lot, and a lot of us there were birders. So we tried to sneak in as much birding as we could, although it wasn't a birding trip. Melissa will tell you that it wasn't a birding trip. So anyway, but one of the great things about going to the islands is that the wildlife is fairly used to people, so you can get really close to lots of things. So we started out the first day on an island, which there were the magnificent frigate birds all over, flying around, and they were at the time displaying. So you didn't have to have a huge lens or whatever. You could get really up close to the bird. This is a magnificent frigate bird in full display, trying to attract a female. The other species there, this is blue-footed booby doing his dance. So that's kind of the famous booby of the Galapagos that's on all the T-shirts and everything. But so they're real neat to see. There's also 2 other species of boobies on the island. This was the red-footed booby, and then there's also the Nazca booby. So we had 3 different species there as well. Also present a lot of places was swallow-tailed gull. Again, they were just about the time that many of the birds were nesting there. So these swallow-tailed gulls were doing courtship displays and everything, which is great. Another bird that was around and nesting on the islands, red-billed tropic bird. And then there are a number of endemic species to the islands. This is the Galapagos hawk. And we have the Galapagos dove as well. And then as many of you know, there's more than just birds on the island. There's other wildlife. This is the large land iguana, which I think gets up to 3 or 4 feet. They're really big guys. And then the famous marine iguanas, which were all over the place on the rocky shores and gathered in big bunches. There's also a couple of unique flightless birds there. This is a flightless cormorant, which obviously used to be able to fly and was, evolved from one of the other cormorants and took up residence on the island and didn't have to worry about flying. So over the many years, it's lost the ability to fly, and you can see those short wings. The other neat bird there is the Galapagos penguin, and we were able to see a number of these, both standing on the shore, and we took little boats, zodiacs in, and they would swim right up to you. So again, you could get really great photos. The ever-present Galapagos seals. We went to one island, and there was one lagoon that had a bunch of flamingos there, so we were able to see some of those. And pretty much everywhere you went, there were some neat birds. This is just the upper left is the Galapagos shearwater, and then some birds that people should recognize: oyster catcher, brown pelican, and same ready turnstones that you can get around here. Of course, the Galapagos is where Darwin saw all this wonderful wildlife and its diversity on these islands, and started, or kind of formulated his thinking on evolution. And one of the groups out there that kind of demonstrated that was the mockingbirds. There's 4 different species there on the Galapagos, and we were able to see all of them. Again, from the upper left going clockwise, you had the hood mockingbird, then the Charles or Florian mockingbird, which is actually a very pretty endangered species now. And we saw, we kind of circled the island that they were on, and we got to see him sitting up on the island. Galapagos mockingbird, and then Chatham mockingbird. So we were lucky to see all 4 of those, because a lot of these birds are just endemic to specific islands, so we had to visit the right places. We also stopped at the island with the Darwin research station on it, and saw the giant tortoises, which used to be all over the island, but are now fairly restricted. And of course, we saw a bunch of the Darwin's finches, which really showed the kind of the radiation of evolution from what they believe was a single finch, many long time ago. This is a picture of the large brown finch. And appropriately sitting on a cactus is the cactus finch. And then just one more is this is the medium brown finch. And when we were there, we thought we kind of knew beforehand, because we did a little studying, but they were actually, when you see them individually, they're kind of hard to tell apart. By the time we left, we had a good idea of what they were. So then one of the key birds we wanted to make sure we saw was the waved albatross. And our tour was such that we were just going to be there about the time that the albatrosses were coming back to Espanola Island to nest. And I believe the guy told us that, at least on the boat we were on, that we were the first group to be able to see the albatrosses here. So we timed it just right, and Dennis was very happy that they had come back just for us. Anyway, so we were taking pictures of albatrosses, and I took this picture of one flying by. And of course, I didn't know it at the time, but then when I got back home, I noticed that this bird actually had a band on it that you can see. And so I kind of pieced together the band number from a couple different pictures, and wrote to the research station there. They actually were able to tell me that this waved albatross was born on the colony at Espanola and is a male, and that he was 38 years old. So just great fortune to be able to find some interesting information about the bird just by taking pictures. Just fortuitous that you could read the band on this one. And so that was our great trip, and a very pleasant adventure for all the good wildlife, and also all of the camaraderie on wherever we went from our several of our DuPage members. Okay, that's it.
Wow. Quite a trip there, Joe.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to keep moving on because I don't see any questions. So next up is John Baker. John is another longtime member and past president of the DuPage Birding Club. John visited Cuba and Colombia in 2019 and will be sharing some of the photos he took while there.
Okay, I guess my screen's up.
Yep.
I was lucky enough to get to Cuba before the pandemic and before Trump made it more difficult to get there. And it's a wonderful place. The birding's easy, the food's great, everything about it was a great trip. But I didn't take my camera because I'd read about some people being hassled with cameras with big lenses and being accused of being a spy and other unpleasantries. So I didn't take many pictures there, but I did take this one with my phone. The blue-headed quail dove is highly endangered. There are maybe as few as 1,000 of them left, and they're all on Cuba. So we went to this blind early in the morning to see some, and I can see why they're going extinct. This bird came around to our side of the blind instead of staying on the safe side. He was practically at my feet when I took this picture. So they need to be a little more skittish around people because they, I understand, are delicious. In November, I went to Colombia. I just went on a highlights tour of 12 days, and we saw over 400 species, including this one. This is the northern screamer. It's a family of 3 birds, 3 species, all in South America. There's the northern screamer, which this is, which is the rarest, the southern screamer, and the hooded screamer. And they're sort of antique geese. They don't have webbed feet, but they do live in marshes. And so when the tour started, I told the guide that this is a bird I really wanted to see. And he said, and I quote, "We don't see it on this trip." I said, well, I saw it last year on the trip. It's on the bird list for last year. At this point, the local guide stepped in and said, in the Magdalena Valley, there is a spot where we might see one if we have time. And so the leader says, okay, well, if we have time, we'll go look for it. So we finished birding about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then all piled into the bus and drove an hour north. And we weren't even out of the bus before we saw this bird. And yes, it did scream for us. And they're like howler monkeys. Once you get them started screaming, they don't stop. Okay. On this tour, we saw 56 species of hummingbirds. And here, if the movie will work, I'll show you them flitting around, but these are the Andean emeralds, and this is the crowned wood nymph here. Let's see what happens. We stopped at a restaurant where they had some feeders and where this golden-bellied star frontlet came in. And if the light is right, they're really quite attractive. A lesser violet ear, fawn-breasted brilliant, Tyrian metal tail, collared Inca. I have no idea why this group of 4 or 5 different hummingbirds are called Incas, but there they are. And this is one of the tanagers. We saw 72 species of tanagers. They were not all this pretty, but many of them were. And that's it.
All right, thank you, John. Those are nice. Quite a collection of hummingbirds. Next, I don't think we have any questions. Oh, somebody was asking about the sound of the screamer, but Steve sent them on to.
Zeno Canto will have it.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what he said. Yes. Next up is Robert Perez. In his travels last summer, Robert visited some of the great national parks of the West. He will be sharing photos he took at the Olympic, North Cascades, Yellowstone, and Grand Canyon National Parks. A little closer to home.
Yes, thank you. So I had planned all these trips in late 2019, confirmed everything in February 2020. And I really debated whether I should go on these trips after all the lockdowns started. As you could see, ultimately, I decided to go, figuring that birding and hiking in remote areas would limit my exposure as well as the exposure of others. So last year in total, I saw 63 new birds that I was able to add to my life list. And I visited 5 national parks. 21 of those 63 birds were seen in national parks. So throughout this presentation, you'll see some of the new ones I saw. So this is the Pacific wren. This was in Olympic National Park, and I visited Olympic in early July 2020. The Pacific wren was the first bird I saw in Olympic National Park, and it was the most common. This was taken in the whole rainforest area. And other birds I saw there for the first time were the Steller's jay, Pacific slope flycatcher, and the varied thrush. This isn't the greatest photo, but this is the chestnut-backed chickadee. They were also pretty common in Olympic. We left the rainforest area and hiked up in some of the mountainy areas of Olympic. Up in the further or higher elevations, I saw some Canada jays, and although I didn't see any, I heard some sooty grouses. So we had crossed Puget Sound en route to North Cascades National Park. I saw rhinoceros auklets, pigeon guillemots, and oyster catchers during that ride. Arriving in North Cascades, I saw this Townsend's warbler, as well as a black-throated gray warbler. Leaving the mountains in North Cascades, we went to some of the glacial lakes there, and I saw a number of barrow goldeneye here. So in total, I saw 19 new birds in Washington. A few weeks after my trip out to Olympic in North Cascades, I went out west again with my siblings and my mother to Yellowstone and Grand Tetons. And the first bird I saw there was the mountain bluebird. So this one I saw just outside of Yellowstone. On my first hike in Yellowstone, I saw what I call my first surprise bird, which was the brewer's sparrow. Before I go on big trips, I always make a list of birds I want to see, and this one I had completely overlooked and didn't even include on my list. So it was good to see it though. Other birds I saw on this hike were mountain chickadees, red-necked grebes, and brewer's blackbirds. So the number 1 on my to see list was the dipper, and missed out on seeing it when I was in Washington, but I was happy to see it here in Yellowstone. This particular bird was very cooperative. It was actually, this is right by Old Faithful, so it was maybe 20 feet from the bridge, and so I was showing my family how, you know, it dives down into the water, and we were watching it for a while. Another one on my list to see was the Clark's nutcracker, and so I was happy to see two of these birds chattering with each other up on top of a really, really tall pine tree. So another exciting find was this Western tanager. And this one is right next to Old Faithful as well. So I was able to get that landmark in my life list. Driving along the southern loop in Yellowstone, we stopped at some hot springs to look at some bison as well as this violet green swallow. Other birds we saw there were red crossbills and western meadowlarks. So I didn't get to photograph any birds in Grand Tetons as we were there for just the day. We did get to see some bears that walked right across the road. So that was cool to see them up close, luckily from the car. But new birds I saw at Grand Tetons were dusky flycatcher, black-billed magpie, and the McGilvary's warbler. It was also there I got to see another dipper diving around. Yeah, so in all, I saw 13 new birds in Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho during this trip. More recently, I traveled to Arizona between Christmas and New Year. So I did some hiking in Sedona before moving on to Grand Canyon. And I saw this Woodhouse's scrub jay while walking to the Cathedral Rock in Sedona. I actually saw this bird a couple years back in Texas, but I only got a short glimpse of it then. So it was nice to get a nice long look at it this time around. So much like the brewer's sparrow was a surprise for me, the northern pygmy owl was another surprise. While I was on a hike, I noticed the ruby-crowned kinglets, bridled titmice, and some solitaires becoming uneasy, flying around, chattering a bunch. And initially I thought this bird was actually a robin. But I'm glad I took my camera out just in case, because I realized it's not a robin, it's an owl. So this one was also very cooperative. It sat in the tree for a while. So I feel very lucky to have seen this one. These are some towhees that I saw. So the canyon towhee is the one that's very plain. And the Abert's towhee is the one with the black mask. So I saw these on the same hike. I saw the owl along with some curve-billed thrashers and a chrysalid thrasher. I saw two Anna's hummingbirds in Sedona. In fact, one of them was doing its courtship display where they fly really, really high up and then dive down and make a little chirpy noise, which I thought was a chirp until I did some research and found out that it's caused by the air moving through the bird's tail. So that was an interesting thing to see. So on to Grand Canyon. When I left Sedona, it was 65 and sunny, and I got to Grand Canyon in the middle of a blizzard. So that was very interesting. So the snow eventually stopped, and out came a large flock of bush tits, as well as a couple spotted towhees. So I walked down into the canyon for a bit and saw this rufous crowned sparrow at the 3 Mile rest stop. And it must have been used to people feeding it because it came right up to me when I sat down. My main goal in Grand Canyon was to see the California condor, but unfortunately was not there this time. So my last day in Arizona, I spent in Phoenix. I had some time before my flight, so I went to the Desert Botanical Garden in Phoenix. I sat down to eat my lunch, and right on cue, a large flock of these Gambel's quail came out, and it was fun to watch them and the chipmunks chase each other around looking for all the scraps. This cactus run I also saw at the Botanical Garden. I had never realized how big they actually were, and they really make our house runs look pretty small. So just like the scrub jay, I also saw the verdin before, but only just briefly. So I was able to see it up close as it flitted around in this tree at the Botanical Garden. Some other birds I saw for the first time in Arizona included the black-capped gnatcatcher, says and black phoebes, Costa's hummingbirds, western bluebirds, gilded flycatcher, and a common blackhawk. In all, I saw 20 new birds in Arizona, and this year I'm hoping to do some birding out in the California national parks. So hopefully I can get close to my 63 new bird record. That is all I have, so thank you very much.
Okay. That really shows you the value of the national parks, doesn't it? All those fantastic birds. Okay. Next up, we have Mike Warner. Mike has designed a website just for bird photography. Currently has over 4,000 high-quality images of birds from DuPage County and around the world. Mike will show you some of the main features of the site and some bird photos. Okay.
Okay. There we go. Am I on?
Go back.
Yes, Mike. We can
All
do
right, sorry about that. And good evening, birders. I have 4,237 pictures I want to share with you, so I'll go along quickly. When I first started using eBird, there were about 1.6 million pictures on eBird. And I started putting my pictures on next to pictures like this on eBird. And so I felt like my pictures were kind of getting lost a little bit. There's now over 25 million pictures on eBird. And I'm not a huge fan of Facebook, but at the same time, you can go on the Illinois birding site and see some great pictures, and you can see pictures taken by a guy in Pekin through his screen door of some cardinals way in the back of his backyard. So I wanted to come up with a site that just focused on bird pictures and good quality bird pictures. So I came up with the Great Bird Pics website. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the features of the website for you this evening. And the first thing I do every morning is click the latest Great Bird Pics button here. And this brings up the most recently uploaded pictures to the website. And right now you can see a number of hummingbirds. These were all posted by a naturalist, one of our members in New Zealand, who travels the world, and she submitted all of these hummingbird pictures. And let's take a look at this one down here, the purple-throated mountain gem. You can click on that, and then you get some information about the bird. You can see that this is a female located in Hallelujah, Costa Rica area. In this case, there's more information that you can scroll down and see. And if you click on the bird itself, you zoom in and you get a close-up image of any of the birds in the database. So you can really enjoy the bird pictures. And behind the whole website is a very powerful database. And you can see on the left how you can filter the database. And right now you can filter it by country. We have birds from 30 different countries in here. Gender, of course, age, activity, like are they flying, are they in the water, are they feeding their young? And then some other types of criteria. We'll just take a look at the author criteria for a second, so we can go in and say, well, I happen to know that one of the best birders in DuPage County, Bonnie Graham, is birder 2011. And so here are some of the 130 pictures that Bonnie has submitted to the website. And we can take a look at the snowy owl here. That looks interesting. So again, we can just kind of click on it and get a close-up of one of Bonnie's great pictures here. Another thing you can do in the search function is pull up all the pictures of just those taken here in Illinois. This number is a little outdated. We have now over 1,400 pictures just of Illinois. And when you do that, you come up with a visual field guide of the birds in the database. You can see as you go across, they're alphabetically listed. These are all taken in Illinois. Almost all of these pictures have more than one image. So if you click on any one of them, you can see several different images of that same species. So if you were out and about, you saw something, you weren't sure what it was, you can check here and you'll find an image of it. Another thing you can do is say, okay, well, I saw a bird when I was out hiking, flying by, and I wasn't sure what it was. So you can come in and say, well, show me all the birds in Illinois that were flying. So in this case, we have about 75 images of birds in flight. So up will come a screen like this, all the different types of birds that were entered into our database. And you can scroll those, click on any one of them that you would like to get a blow up of it and get some more information about where it was seen, who took the picture, and so on. Another function that I enjoy is the random function. So you can just come in and you're not using the computer, you're just reading or doing something else, click the random picks function, and every 7 seconds it pulls up a random picture from the 4,237 pictures. And if you say, well, that looks interesting, you can click on it and get the information about that image up on your screen. And of course, every website needs to have a blog. So we have the Great Bird Picks blog. And I put on articles there about things that are going on around me or around the world related to birding. This particular post was about a trip that we took a couple weeks ago to St. Joe, Michigan. And then hand in hand with the blog, I send out regular emails to all the members. I like to feature the pictures from the members. So I'll put 3 or 4 pictures in the emails and say, hey, take a look at this one. Or I'll put in information about photography and bird tips, trips themselves. I'm working on a report right now that I'll put out on the email and blog next week about our trip to Emiquon to see all the snow geese there. And then any interesting articles that that I come across, I'll share with our members as well. So greatbirdpics.com, it is free. There are no ads. It's just bird pictures. That's all there is. It's greatbirdpics.com. Thank you very much.
Hey, Mike, we got a question about the quality of the images. How do you maintain such high quality images? Do you curate all of them, or?
I do. I really stress up front with the members as they join that they're going to put up good looking pictures. I've defined what I think a great bird pic should look like.
Yep.
And there have been several that have been put up and I say, maybe that's not a great bird pic. There's always exceptions to the rule. Some people will put up a mediocre pic, but if it's a great story behind it, and they do have an opportunity to write the story there as part of the description,
Okay.
then I'll certainly allow that, because people are as interested in the stories behind the bird as the bird picture themselves.
Okay. Wow. Thank you. Thanks for showing everybody this great resource. We've used it on the website. I know that.
Yeah, well, thanks for the opportunity to share it with you guys.
What a great resource. I mean, geez. And it's got a lot of really great features, I think. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's amazing. Okay. Next we have one of your photographers, Bonnie Graham. Since last members night, Bonnie has traveled around Illinois and to 5 states: Arizona, Louisiana, Indiana, Florida, and Zambia in Minnesota. She's going to share some of her firsts that she saw on her trips.
All right, stand by.
And
Let's see,
I'll,
share. Share.
it's coming.
It's come. Okay. All right. I don't have the names of my birds here or
There
the
you go.
titles, but like Natalie said, these are all firsts from the last couple years that I've seen. And this was taken at the Arboretum, and I'm sure most of you are saying, Bon, that's a northern flicker. You haven't seen that before? Well, I have seen northern flickers before, but this was the first time I seen one flying to a nest that had some fledglings in there. So first don't necessarily mean lifers. It just means the first time I've seen something different. So peregrine falcon. This was the first time I saw a peregrine falcon in DuPage County. And this particular one was at the Wooddale Reservoir. And he was the most cooperative little guy I've seen. I mean, I was standing right underneath him along the path. Bikers and hikers were going, and he just sat there looking at everybody. This is a Say's Phoebe. It's a first for me for Illinois and for DuPage County. This was at the Hawk Watch that I think Jeff Smith or Vicky put out a bulletin saying there was a Say's Phoebe up there, and naturally I went up there to see it. I saw this at the Arboretum a couple years ago. It's an immature blue morph snow goose. He was in the midst of a whole bunch of Canada geese, and I cropped this picture. It looks like he's ready to fly, but to the right of him was a Canada goose chasing him. So it kind of looks cool with his wings and the two-tone colors on his wings there. And this was a couple years ago at the Indiana Birding Festival. First time I went there. The first is I saw 2 prothonotary warblers together. Usually I only saw one, but this was a first for me, seeing both of them and checking out a house there. And they actually end up building a nest in there too. Now, this is 2019. I made a trip with one of my birding pals to Arizona, my first time ever in Arizona. And so all the birds in Arizona were lifers for me. And this was a Gamble's quail. And this was right off our little patio. We were just sitting there having dinner, and every night him and a female would come walking by. Pretty cool looking birds, I think. This is a painted redstart. We saw a few of these. I just think they're pretty birds. That was a lifer for me there. This is the Lucifer hummingbird. A lot of little places have feeders all over the place in their yards. And word got out that a Lucifer was one of the feeders at this lady's house. This is a cool looking woodpecker, the acorn woodpecker. And this wasn't a lifer, but I put it because this is the closest I ever got to a acorn woodpecker. I mean, I was literally probably 4 feet away. He was on a feeder and right next to a path. And he can care less that people were standing there. Guess he was very hungry. Oh, this is the main bird that I didn't think we would ever see, but being at the right place at the right time is what a lot of birding is about. This is the elegant trogon. He sat there, geez Louise, 15, 20 minutes just preening himself, calling, could care less that there were birders around, taking pictures and such. And this is, I'll have to tell you, I did cheat on this one because there was Photoshop done on this one. Because this branch right that goes by his head right here, I don't know if my cursor was going right through his face. So it covered his eye and half his face. And I was telling my daughter, asked my daughter how to get rid of that. And, you know, these young kids know how to use these computers pretty well. And I basically was able to clone the stick out to make it look like in the back of it. So that was a little cheating there, but I still like the way it looks. And then there was no cheating on this one. But that's a cool looking bird. Now, this is Louisiana. My husband and I, for his Christmas present one year, he's a huge Tabasco fan, loves Tabasco. He puts Tabasco on everything, everything. And his Christmas present was going down to Avery Island, is where they make Tabasco sauce or grow some peppers down there. And they have a museum and all sorts of stuff. But it's also a great place to go birding. And this guy was my, at the time was a life bird for me, the black neck stilt. And there was a few of them and he was at the right place. It was the sun behind my back and got all the colors on him. This was at one time my 400th life bird, the boat-tailed grackle. But that was before, I guess the Thayers and the Iceland are now considered one bird. So this guy is now my 399th bird. This is the Rosette spoonbill. This is a place by Avery Island called Jefferson Island. And there was a lot of Rosette spoonbills there. And that was a life bird for me. So that was a first. Now, egrets I've seen, but I've never seen little egrets, little baby egrets. And on Avery Island, there's a place called the Jungle Gardens that the founders of Tabasco, they were huge conservationists. And at one time, along by some water, they built a bird city for all the egrets and herons to come to roost. And to this day, it's grown and there's thousands and thousands of egrets, snowy egrets, cattle egrets. Most of the ones that we saw were the egrets here. So these were just little, and these guys, I even saw smaller ones, but I've never seen little ones like that. And you can see the mom is feeding him, or I don't know if it's a mom or dad, but I thought it was really cute. And then, you know, like all babies, they grow into teenagers and then they get, I honestly thought the mother or the parent was getting attacked because there's 2 teenagers and the mother flew in and they just wanted whatever food she brought. And after about 5 minutes, she was able to get away unscathed, but I was looking for like security or something. I mean, I thought this bird wasn't going to make it with her kids there. Time for them to leave the nest, I think. And then the painted bunting. Of all the pictures, I wanted to be perfect. This was it, but it didn't happen because I was so nervous. This was right out of our cabin that we were staying at. I thought I just saw a flash of red. I put the binos up thinking it was a cardinal. And I saw this guy jump out and you know, when you see a bird that you don't expect and it's a lifer that you've always wanted to see, you can imagine how the emotions were going. And it turns out the male and female must have been nesting in the area, because we saw them every single day we were there. We were there 5 days. And every day, morning and evening, he was out there feeding. And you would have thought I'd get at least one decent picture. But anyway, the adventure and the day we saw him was unbelievable. Now I'm down to Florida. This is a sandwich tern. I went to visit my niece there, and I've never really birded in Florida. So this was a life bird for me. The loggerhead shrike, it wasn't a life bird, but it was the first time I actually got a photo of him, and I actually saw him catch a lizard and chow that thing down. And this was right out their house there. He stayed there about 20 minutes or so. I don't know how many pictures I took of him, but I took a lot. Okay, now every year since, geez Louise, I think this was the 5th or 6th year I've gone to Duluth, Saxon Bog to, you know, spend my winter there, spend a couple of days during the winter to see. And this was the best view I ever got of a black-backed woodpecker. And we actually saw them this year too. I went again this past year. And then this was the star of the trip, was the boreal owl. He made big news last year. I mean, a lot of people went up just to see him, and we were very fortunate that at very tail end of flight, he came out to the one of the feeders and just stood there. And they're not bothered by people. I mean, there are people standing on the street taking photos, and he was just waiting for his meal to come. But I love those little beady yellow eyes. That's pretty cool. And that's it.
Oh, wow. Some really fantastic photos there, Bonnie.
Thank you.
And I love those little baby egrets.
I'm telling you, I thought when, you know, the mother came with those teenagers, I was literally looking for security to say somebody better go rescue her. It's a cool place to visit. Anybody ever goes to Louisiana, I would definitely recommend going to Avery Island. It's a pretty cool place to visit.
Thank you, Bonnie.
You're welcome.
Okay. Next up is Siriman Ratrukal. Sorry. Siriman has taken multiple trips to northern and western Thailand, and tonight she will share some of the highlights from her travels. Okay. See if she gets on. I don't know if are you muted? Siriman?
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. So sorry about that.
I'll mute myself so you can talk.
Okay. So, you know, we're from Thailand, but I didn't start birding in Thailand. So it's kind of like going back and explore like all new birds in the last few years. So this is, I think, the northern part. Next to Myanmar, really, I think probably the same area that one of the speaker had gone to previously. And I'm just gonna give you all the names down there because I don't remember all of them really. So that's also for a reminder for myself. This is a white-headed bulbul, and they're usually coming in groups like that. This is in one of the out mountain. This place has basically is a national park and has no lodging, no bathrooms, nothing. So people up there are only, I think, for birdings really. This is a spotted-breasted parrotbill, and we see them. They're regular for this place. Siberian ruby throat, is also seen here. They come also down to the middle part of Thailand as well, a little bit further south. This is rusty cheek, skimitar babbler. I'm sorry, I'm not pronouncing the name correctly. but in the same area as well. This is a good catch. I think it's was something that was highly sought for as Himalayan Kudia, and it was the most I could get. I think there is a male and a female in the same area. Sunbird, there are several kinds of sunbird. This is one of the most colorful. This is called sunbird up in the it's eating this the plants, the flower of the plants. I mean, not the flower, but the nectar. And it blooms only, I think, certain time of the year. So if we go there, then they're there. Scarlet face, Leo Kikla. I'm sorry. If any of you can pronounce better than me, please chime in. But very colorful as well. Comes to eat fruit. And this is in the area that there was a station, a soldier station, and they had fruits out, so they came to eat some fruit. This is laughing thrush. Still here. Orange belly leaf bird. Leaf birds are pretty common, although now less common. Commonly seen, but they're pretty. There are several kinds of leaf birds. This is hoopy, and we actually had one just a couple of days ago in our house in Bangkok that he came, but he basically eats insects on the ground. Browing in the same area as well. I love that white ring around the eye. This is a white wagtail. The wagtail is pretty abundant up in Northern Ireland. They have even a festival to count the wagtails like once a year. I think happened not too long ago. Brown strike, so different kind of strike. And that's our family. Actually, this is when my dad came, all this trip was 2019, and he injured his leg. And up on the mountain, this is all there's no restaurant, nothing. And my daughter was wheeling him. So he went birding in a wheelchair, and he started birding in his 70s. And now is one of the activity that he loves. This is in the western part of Thailand, in one of the national parks. It's blue pita. There's several kinds of pitas in Thailand, and the one that was really rare. We're not sure if it's extinct. I think it's a black. I'm sorry, I can't think of the name in English, but it has a name black. It is a black pita, but this one is blue pita. That is a male, and female is a little bit more pale. Broad bill. This one is also very cute. I really like the way it looks. It's silver-breasted broad bill. It's a smaller one. There's other kinds of broad bill as well in Thailand, and they go all the way down to Malaysia, and also I think also in Indonesia have them. It's a kind of woodpecker, greater flameback, and I think we call them, like, I think you say 3 toes or 4 toes. And I think this one was 4 toes. This is mountain imperial pigeon. This is all from Western Thailand. This is hornbill. This is a brown hornbill. The hornbill mate in around, actually, I think this time of the year, really. So the female goes into the hole, in the big tree, and it shed out all the feathers to raise the young, and the male would be responsible to come and feed the female. So if something happened to the male, the whole family would actually not survive. And this is a time that birders would go and watch them, because the male would come regularly, like a clockwork, like every couple of hours. So this is one of the smaller hornbills. They have like a great hornbill and several other kinds of hornbills. And again, they live in Thailand all the way down to Malaysia as well. This is a blue-throated barbet. There are several kinds of barbet, and this one is one of the colorful one, like medium size, really. This is a great barbet. This is, I think, the biggest one that we have. in Thailand. And then I like bluebirds, so I'm just gonna show a collection of little bluebirds that we have. This is ultramarine flycatcher. Also, a tiny, really tiny bird, and we saw them in northern Thailand. Blue-throated flycatcher. I forgot what this one is really, but it's another flycatcher, hue blue flycatcher. And this is Asian fairy bluebird. This is a bigger bird. And then this is gray bush-chat. I think that's all we have. Yeah, this is the continuum of the birding in a wheelchair from my family right before the COVID.
Oh.
Yeah, thank you.
Siraman, that brings back fond memories of our last chance to escape before COVID was in Thailand. And we came back the first week of March. So when we came back and having to quarantine, we walked right into Mr. Pritzker's shutdown. So we've been shut down ever since Thailand. But some of the birds that you saw, we missed. And so I'm very jealous, especially the Cudio in particular. That was a bird we looked for quite a long time.
Yeah, they're it's here again. Like I think it's a couple of people just photograph him, just yesterday and today. Yeah, so you should go back.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Natalie, unmute yourself.
Sorry. Okay. Thank you. All right, last we have Dennis Kenya. Dennis is the founding member of the DuPage Birding Club and past president. In 2019, Dennis traveled to Zambia and then on to northern Botswana, as far west as the Okavango Delta. He's going to be sharing some of the highlights of his trip. Okay. And hopefully.
Doing a little screen sharing here. Take a second.
Okay, we can hear you, so I'll stop.
Okay. So what you guys got to me pretty quick. You guys all talked really fast. So I guess that means that I can probably spend about a half an hour on this. So buckle up. We're going for a ride. So Melissa and I, we were actually celebrating our 40th wedding anniversary. And so as a start to our celebrations, we did do that Galapagos trip that Joe was talking about. And he was absolutely right. Melissa insisted that wasn't a birding trip. And this one was not meant to be a birding trip either. And we did this one in September. So we really celebrated quite a bit that year. But here's our intrepid crew. And every time I go on a trip, I have these people that just, I can't travel without them. So, so they all join in. And so the people that we have here in this picture, this is Bob Stone, and then his significant other, which is Pam Nelson, and there's Melissa and Dennis, and then here's Diane Bilderbeck and Linda Gulsky, who's traveled with me quite a bit as well in the past. So we had a great time. Here we are doing one of our sundowners. And on this particular trip, we actually started out in South Africa and we focused on the Cape Town area. We worked our way up the West Coast a little bit and then along the coast this way as well. We didn't get very far actually from Cape Town, but we did start out there. And then we moved our adventures going through Johannesburg. We eventually made it to Livingstone in Zambia, and that's where Victoria Falls is. So we kind of went on a little island for a couple of days that's within the Zambezi River. And there was some really good birding there, even though it wasn't a birding trip. And from there, then we did a land cruise a little bit north and then crossed over the Zambezi River and we went into Botswana. And so we did start out in Chobe in this area here, and then we continued to work our way through various management areas and eventually ended up in the Okavango Delta, which is here. So doesn't look like you're going very far, but there were a lot of little 4 to 8 seater type planes we were flying in, bouncing around in order to accomplish all of that. It was a great time. So I'm going to show you some pictures that most of them are just iconic birds of Africa. Birds that, if you go there, you're likely to see them. And, most of them I've seen, several times on previous trips, but they're nice birds to share. And I kind of wanted to, just show people what's going on in Zambia and Botswana. So they're not the most unusual birds in some cases, but they're still really nice birds to see. So this one in particular, the Okavango dove, it's a bird you see all the time, but usually you're seeing them bursting away from the Jeep track, and all you do is see them in flight. So I was happy to see one perched up in a place where I could actually get a decent photo. And the malachite kingfishers, you see those everywhere you go, little ponds. You're always going to find malachites. And here's one of the iconic birds of Africa, the African jacana. And you can't help but see that bird when you go to many of these countries in Africa. I'd like you to pay particular attention to the hind claw. So I'm starting at the end of the toe right here with my cursor, but if you look at the claws actually going all the way back to here. So they're very, very long claws on that back toe. And that helps to enable them to be able to walk out on the lily pads. The other bird is might look like it's a baby African jacana, but this is actually lesser jacana. This is a bird you have to work a lot harder for in order to get it. And the little island that we stayed at when we were on the Zambezi River in the Zambian part of the trip, it was a great site to go look for lesser jacanas and a few other specialty birds. And that was part of the reason that we actually stayed there for a couple of nights. But we did eventually get the lesser jacana. It's a backlit photo, but it's a great bird nonetheless. And I have to throw a few mammals in here. So here's a leopard that we came across. I believe this was in Chobe, if I'm not mistaken. And then bee eaters are a family of birds that are all over Africa and other parts of the world as well. But there's really a large concentration of them in Africa. And so we got, one of my favorites is both of the carmine bee eaters. This one happens to be southern carmine. Here we have little bee eater, and then these are white-fronted bee eaters. But all of them are really exciting birds and fun to photograph. And another classic or iconic bird of Africa is the Kori bustard. And this is one of the really, really big birds. It probably rivals those screamers that John Baker was talking about. He mentioned that we had the 3 screamers, northern, southern, and horn screamer was the third one. And it's probably a battle between those birds and this one as far as what's the heaviest flying bird in the world. So this one is capable of flight, as are obviously the screamers are too. But another one of those specialty target birds that was on the island is white-backed night heron. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with night herons. We have a couple of different species here in Illinois. But this one's really hard to come up with. They're really skulkers. They are way more nocturnal than the behavior of our night heron. So finding them is really, really difficult. But we did come across one. We got excellent looks at it. And I wish I had a picture of a front-on view of this bird, because when you see it head on, these eyes really bulge out, which is probably a characteristic because of its nocturnal behavior. But it just looks like he's got giant goggles that he's wearing. Really cool looking bird. This, I believe, happened in one of the wildlife management areas before we actually got to the Okavango. And we were zeroing in on this pair of wattled cranes in our Jeep. We were moving towards them. And as we were moving, I saw something scurrying through the grasses. And my first impression was I saw this spotted cat. And so right away I yelled that there was a leopard ahead of us. But in the end, I realized it was a much smaller cat. And in fact, it's a serval. And servals are probably about the size of maybe like our bobcat or our lynx. They're probably in about that size. But it was a lifer cat for me, so I was very excited to see that. And this serval was actually stalking these cranes, and was probably interested in trying to get a meal out of that if it possibly could. And I mean, if you can compare that to what we have happening with our sandhill cranes and our whooping cranes down in Florida, they're getting attacked by bobcats. So it makes sense that a cat this size could go after these cranes. But the cranes got pretty wound up, and there was a lot of commotion because the serval was around. Eventually, the serval left the scene, but the wattled cranes were then still fairly excited, and they decided to work on their bonding skills. And so they went into an elaborate courtship dance, which I have some really nice videos of that I didn't include here today, but it was really fascinating to watch them. And they do a lot of this typical behavior that we've seen our sandhill cranes do when they're doing courtships. You know, they're jumping in the air with their wings flapping and throwing vegetation into the air, and quite a spectacle. So it was really a lot of fun to see that. And it was great to see a serval. And in visiting some of the wet areas, obviously, if you're in the Okavango Delta, you're going to be, in some pretty wet places. Here's a black crake, which is, a small rail. It's sort of the size of our Sora. So you can think of it kind of in that perspective. And then a really cool, very, very small goose is the African pygmy goose. And there are other pygmy geese in the world, but this is the African one. And they just have a really neat facial pattern, great, colors coming in. So it was a great opportunity to photograph those. And some other iconic birds of Africa. We have many hornbills in Africa as well. Quite a bit different than some of the ones that Sirman was talking about. But southern red-billed hornbill is a pretty common hornbill that you can run into, and they seem to be pretty gregarious. So you can often see them in groups, and they're not afraid to show themselves. So they're very easy to photograph. You'll find them around the lodges quite often. So they make themselves available quite a bit. But one of my favorite birds in Africa are the helmet shrikes. And this one is the white-crested helmet shrike. And they usually forage around in flocks. I can't recall how many we had in this group, but at any rate, I did get one fairly decent shot of a helmet shrike here. And I've actually taken some nice pictures of this bird also in Uganda. And up there, they're lacking all of this white in the wing. So the bird looks identical, except that the whole back area here is completely black. Whereas in the case of this individual, you can see it's got all that white running down. So certainly two different races of the white-crested helmet shrike. Another iconic bird of Africa. When people think of Africa, they often envision this one, the saddle-billed stork. And I've seen it on quite a few of my trips to Africa. And it's just a beautiful bird. It has that little saddle going across the bill here. Bright colors, spectacular looking bird. Very, very big. Very, very big stork compared to our wood stork. And then we did have a lot of sand grouse. All of them that we were encountering were double-banded sand grouse. And typically you work really hard to get sand grouse, but these were just all over the place. It seemed like everywhere we went, we had them in the Jeep tracks. So it was quite easy to get pictures of them, not only individuals, but we actually had families running up the Jeep track in front of us. And then this is Burchell's cuckoo. This was a bird that in South Africa back in 2016, I was working really, really hard to get this bird. Those that were on that trip remember we spent a lot of time trying to get me on a Burchell's cuckoo because I just really wanted to add that to my list. And so they were all over the place on this trip. And that's kind of how birding goes, right? And here's some more cool mammals. One of them was a lifer for me, the African wild dogs. And we actually had 3 encounters with wild dogs on this trip. And I've been wanting to see those for a very, very long time. All the trips I've made to Africa, I've always managed to miss them. And it was great to catch up with them. And we got to see them more or less on a hunt, or at least, working on carcasses, bringing food to the pups. And the whole experience was very, very exciting. And then there's been, all sorts of folklore about honey badgers. And this is probably one of the better shots I've ever gotten of a honey badger. And this one was out in the middle of the daytime. And it was just right after we had seen those wild dogs. So it was kind of a nice pairing to be seeing, 2 predators like that in succession. And in that same area, we also had this lioness. And we saw lots of lions. I've got, tons of pictures of lions. But the reason I really like this one in particular is it seems like that ghost in the grasses. I mean, you wouldn't think that an animal this large could just disappear in the grasses, but this bird, this lioness, I almost said bird, really blends in. And I just love this particular photo of a lion. And one more of the iconic classic African birds, the lilac-breasted roller. And then there's our other rollers there. This is the purple roller. And everybody that goes to Africa, if they're in the right part of the continent, obviously. But lilac-breasted roller is always a bird that pleases everyone, whether you're a birder or not. They're just so spectacular in color, a lot of iridescent blues. And when they fly off of their perch, all of that just glows in flight. And so they're magnificent birds to see.